The Scholarship Jacket, Part 4, by Martha Salinas. It was a very sad and withdrawn girl who dragged into the principal's office the next day. This time he did look me in the eyes. "What did your grandfather say?" I sat very straight in my chair. "He said to tell you he won't pay the $15. The principal muttered something I couldn't understand under his breath and walked over to the window. He stood looking out at something outside. He looked bigger than usual when he stood up. He was a tall, gaunt man with gray hair, and I watched the back of his head while I waited for him to speak. "Why?" he finally asked. "Your grandfather has the money. He owns 200-acre ranch." I looked at him, forcing my eyes to stay dry. "I know, sir, but he said if I had to pay for it, then it wouldn't be a scholarship jacket." I stood up to leave. "I guess you'll just have to give it to Joanna." I hadn't meant to say that. It had just slipped out. I was almost to the door when he stopped me. "Martha, wait!" I turned and looked at him, waiting. What did he want now? I could feel my heart pounding loudly in my chest and see my blouse fluttering where my breasts should have been. Something bitter and vile tasting was coming up in my mouth. I was afraid I was going to be sick. I didn't need any sympathy speeches. He sighed loudly and went back to his big desk. He watched me, biting his lip. "Okay, we'll make an exception in your case. I'll tell the board that you'll get your jacket." I could hardly believe my ears. I spoke in a trembling rush. "Oh, thank you, sir." Suddenly I felt great. I didn't know about adrenaline in those days, but I knew something was pumping through me, making me feel as tall as the sky. I wanted to yell, jump, run the mile, do something. I ran out so that I could cry in the hall where there was no one to see me. At the end of the day, Mr. Schmidt winked at me and said, "I hear you're getting the scholarship jacket this year." His face looked as happy and innocent as a baby's, but I knew better. Without answering, I gave him a quick hug and ran to the bus. I cried on the walk home again, but this time because I was so happy and I couldn't wait to tell Grandpa, and I ran straight to the field. I joined him in the row where he was working, and without saying anything, I crouched down and started pulling up the weeds with my hands. Grandpa worked alongside me for a few minutes, and he didn't ask what had happened. After I had a little pile of weeds between the rows, I stood up and faced him. "The principal said he's making an exception for me, Grandpa, and I'm getting the jacket after all. That's after I told him what you said." Grandpa didn't say anything. He just gave me a pat on the shoulder and a smile. He pulled out the crumpled red handkerchief that he always carried in his back pocket and wiped the sweat off his forehead. "Better go see if your grandmother needs any help with supper." I gave him a big grin. He didn't fool me. I skipped and ran back to the house, whistling some silly tune.